Your Excellency, I'm very glad to have you here, and I was wondering if I must wish you Happy New Year, because I know that in India you celebrate New Year 8 times. Why is that? Is it true?
Well, Happy New Year. You can very well wish me. We do celebrate the New Year on the 1st of January as well, as per the Gregorian calendar. But you're absolutely right. We have a variety of New Years in India, depending on whether you follow the solar calendar or the lunar calendar. Now, it usually coincides with spring, so it's in March or April. And actually, we have more than 8.
You're lucky, I think. But you deserve big congratulations because of your medicine and medics. You have doctors all around the world and traditions in this area from 2050 years. But does this experience help you in fighting pandemic?
Ancient Indian art and science, in fact, of medicine is called Ayurveda. It is the science of life, and it dates back to 5,000 years, and it's very much a part of our culture. And in modern times, we've had a great competitive advantage in having a very skilled, large manpower in the medical sector, which is both doctors and nurses. We have about 1.25 million doctors. We also have great strengths in R&D and research in the biotech and pharmaceutical sectors. During the pandemic, we have managed to become the pharmacy of the world. We have supplied medicines and medical supplies to 150 countries, apart from fulfilling our own needs. And now, as the world heads towards vaccination, we have also become the partner of choice for vaccine production, besides vaccine research. We've already produced about 60% of the world's vaccines, so a lot of the vaccines which will take care of the pandemic are sure to be produced in India.
Will you produce a vaccine against COVID, and do you have any plans to sell to another countries?
Yes, absolutely. As I said, we are the largest vaccine producer in the world in any case, and we produce about 1.5 billion doses of vaccines, even in ordinary times. The WHO sources about 70% of its vaccines from us. During the pandemic, we have 19 vaccines which are actually under various stages of trial. 2 have already been approved. The first is the Oxford AstraZeneca Serum India vaccine. And there is another one which is totally indigenously developed, called Covaxin, developed by Bharat Biocon, which has also been approved for emergency use. Not only has production started of these, but on the 16th of January, the world's largest vaccination program was launched by our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi. And in its first stage, we expect to immunize about 300 million people by August. So it'll be healthcare workers, frontline workers like the police, it'll be the elderly, those over 50, and those with comorbidities who will, of course, have the first preference. So we will be supplying vaccines to other parts of the world. In fact, this week already, we have gifted about 2 million vaccines to Bangladesh and 150,000 to Bhutan. We are supplying already to Brazil.
In India, there are over 10 million people with COVID. What is the situation now, and what are the measures?
You're absolutely right. About 10.5 million Indians have been affected by COVID. But we need to put this in perspective, given that India accounts for about 1/6 of humanity. So our recovery rate is 96% as against a global average of 55%. And also our mortality rate is lower at 1.44% as against a global average of 2.13%.
Can you tell me more about this paper strip test in India, how it works? How do you test for COVID in India?
We've done about 200 million tests already in the country. The choice method has been the RT-PCR test, which is the gold standard internationally for testing. But we've also used antigen test, antibodies test. At the end of last year was these Feluda strips, which basically use CRISPR technology, which is used in genomics, and this is now being used as well. It's a rapid test.
At the beginning of the pandemic, there were very tough measures in India. No trains, no planes.
India was very quick to act, and there was a very strict lockdown. The lockdown was gradually relaxed after 2 months. And now in most of the country there is no lockdown in any case, but there are some containment zones in the more affected areas where movement and activities are restricted. But in all other places everything is open, subject to certain restrictions, for example to international travel, which is discouraged, or we say theatre should have 50% capacity, or if there's a social gathering in a closed space, it should not have more than 200 people.
And what are the damages and losses?
You know, the pandemic has wreaked unprecedented havoc on the global economy, and India has not been an exception. Especially the lockdown at the start led to our economy in the quarter of April to June, suffering badly. But since then, the government has taken a lot of measures. There's a huge fiscal stimulus package of $280 billion. The government has also undertaken a variety of reforms, policy reforms and initiatives, and also put in place measures for the most vulnerable, be it ensuring that their financial or nutrition and other needs are not adversely affected to too much of an extent. And all these have restored confidence, and they have put growth back on proper track. A lot of big companies from around the world, especially big tech, Google, Facebook, Apple, have all announced bigger investments into India. And the IMF has also projected that in 2021 the Indian economy will grow by 8.8%. So hopefully the worst of the pandemic is behind all of us.
India is the largest producer of tea, and after a few minutes you will show me how you drink tea in India.
You call tea chai in Bulgaria, and chai is the Hindi name for tea. We're also very proud of our tea, because not only do we produce various kinds, at least 8 different kinds of tea, but we also produce the finest tea in the world, which is Darjeeling tea. Now, Darjeeling tea is grown in northeast India, in the Darjeeling region. It has its own GI indication. And this is called the champagne of teas. It has a unique muscatel flavor, a beautiful light orange color, and a very delicate aroma. And this is what we are going to serve you today. This is what you get in some of the finest restaurants in the world. What is very popular, however, at the street level is masala chai. And that is basically tea in which a lot of spices have been thrown in. So you have black pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, etc. And you boil them in the water with the milk and the tea leaves. But for that you would use a more ordinary kind of black tea.
It sounds like a fairy tale.
Tea has immense health benefits, So all kinds of tea. They're rich in antioxidants. They actually help you sleep better. And when you want, they keep you awake for longer. So it's all good.
Is it true that you eat mostly with fingers, and after eating you drink water or milk instead of alcohol?
Okay, now it depends what you are eating and where, but traditionally, yes, people in India have eaten with their fingers, as you call them. We call it hands, eat with their hands. traditionally everywhere in the world, bread is always eaten with hands in any case. So in India, some of the cuisine is bread-based and the other is rice-based in terms of staples. Where people eat rice, they also eat with their hands. Yes, it is not an integral part of Indian meals. So most Indians would probably have a glass of water. Some would even have buttermilk, depending on which part of the country they're from. Some could have coconut water, but even that is not a compulsory part of the meal. It's completely optional if you want to drink something.
You use a lot of spices.
Most of our meals include a lot of fresh vegetables, dairy, lentils, cereals, and meat and fish. The food can be cooked in any way, so we have every imaginable, conceivable way, from baking to steaming to frying. In restaurants, some Northwest Indian tandoori cuisine, which is, meats and other things which are marinated and cooked in a clay oven, and they're absolutely scrumptious. The best barbecued kind of food that you would eat. Then you have glorious basmati rice biryanis across the country, which are infused with fragrant spices and which also have meats and vegetables in them. You have the most delicious sweetmeats in the east of India, and in the south you can have what some people associate Indian cuisine with, which is these really fiery curries with lots of red pepper in them.
Is it true that on one plate you can put 20 dishes or more?
Yes.
How do you do that?
Indians take their food very seriously. So traditionally there is a system where families would eat in thalis. A thali is a big platter with lots of little bowls in it, or little compartments. I think the idea was traditionally to have a balanced meal. So there would, as I told you, there would be a staple like rice or bread. There would be lentils. There would be at least one vegetable. There would be yogurt. There would be a meat or fish. There would be salad, pickle, poppadums, and a dessert. And there's a huge focus, as I said, on vegetables. So it's very, half the country is vegetarian.
And because we are talking about cuisine, is it true that mothers and wives cook fresh lunch for children and husband every day and use a special supplier?
Mothers do cook very often, just like elsewhere in the world. They make a packed lunch very often for their spouses and children. But this supply system is actually specific to Mumbai, which is the commercial capital of India. It's also where all the film industry is. And here there's something called the dabba system, where there are these housewives and even restaurants which make homemade meals. So because homemade food is different from restaurant food, right? So they make these homemade meals which are packed in boxes, and then there's a special supply system of about 5,000 delivery men who deliver these boxes around Mumbai for people in offices, schools, etc. to eat.
And please tell me, what does it mean, this red dot on the forehead of some girls or women?
That's right. It's called the bindi. Now, traditionally, it was often seen as a mark of being married. It was also an adornment. So it was not just married women. All the married women tended to wear a red bindi. But these days, everybody uses it. And it's more a fashion thing or an adornment. So it doesn't have to be round and it doesn't have to be red.
You mentioned marriage. We see lovely and beautiful love stories in the Indian serials, but I read that in the real life, the marriage is arranged by relatives. Is it true?
Two things. First, whatever you see in TV serials and in movies has to have some basis in reality, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. So we do have love marriages as well, but you are right, we have a lot of arranged marriages too. Now, traditionally, it was the families which chose a suitable prospect or a few suitable prospects for their sons or daughters. and they would see that the family is of a similar social standing, has a decent financial standing, commensurate to their own. But I must tell you that in the cities, it is more akin to, let's say, friends putting together two other friends who they think will get along or like each other. So it works more like your parents putting prospects in front of you, and you're meeting them a few times and deciding whether you want to have anything to do with them further or not. So it's not like somebody just being pushed into something or into marriage with somebody who they don't know and don't appreciate. It is not that, mostly.
And I read a real story about Miss India 2013 who fell in love with a Bulgarian.
Oh, I'm not aware of this one. Did she marry him?
I don't know. Yeah, I must check.
Yes, that's always very important in all love stories, isn't it? How it ends.
Is it tradition in India to use Bulgaria for a set for Bollywood production and movies?
In the last few years, Bulgaria has become very popular with the Indian film industry, and we've had some very big films shot here. We've had Bahubali, Dilwale, Shivai, Brahmas soon to be coming out. The great thing about movies is that Indian movies are actually very widely watched around the world. Our film industry is bigger than Hollywood. We produce more films than Hollywood. We produce about 1,800 a year. And they have wide viewership in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and even some parts of Europe. And because so many Indian films are now being shot here, Indian tourists have started wanting to come to Bulgaria. So this has really increased the number of Indian tourists.
When we hear India, we think of yoga, Bollywood, curry, Taj Mahal. What else? What we still do not know about your country?
You'll have to give me at least 24 hours of TV time if you expect me to do any justice to that question. Usually people who live in India for a few years, like diplomats, when they're leaving after 3 years, then they say, well, I've just about sort of maybe understood 5% of the country. But jokes apart, what can I tell you in a minute or two about India? It is a beautiful country, the size of a subcontinent. We have an uninterrupted history going back 5,000 years, which means there is layers and layers of tradition. We have 23 official languages, including Hindi, which is the national language, and English, which is used for work. We have the most exquisite fabrics, textiles, handicrafts, some of which I would like to show you.